Hello dear students, the topic I want to discuss today is neurophysiology. Today we will be covering the introductory part of neurophysiology. So we know that our body activities, our normal body activities are controlled and coordinated by two integrated organ systems. We have two well-developed organ systems for the entire controlling of our body. The one is called nervous system and the second one is endocrine system. Endocrine system എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മൾ പിന്നീട് പഠിക്കും. We know what is endocrine system and what is the role of hormone in our normal metabolic activities. So അത് ഡീറ്റെയിൽ ആയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ പിന്നീട് പഠിക്കും. The endocrine system regulates the more slow processes such as metabolic activities of the body. The main substance or molecule involved in this endocrine system is hormone. But the nervous system is entirely different from endocrine system. The nervous system affects a more rapid control over the body functions. So it is very fast compared to endocrine system. Endocrine system is a slow process, but the nervous system is very fast, more rapid. The nervous system performs three major functions. What are the three major functions of nervous system? Number one is it receives information from the external and internal environment. It receives information from the external and internal environment. The second one is it coordinates, processes and store this information. So that is the second step. It coordinates, processes and stores this information. And the third important point is it initiates appropriate responsive actions. Okay, so the first function is receiving information, and with that they receive information and coordinate or process and store this information, and finally appropriate responses are produced. So this is the organ system that gives us our feeling and emotions and our capacities to think, learn, reason and remember. Okay, so all the activities including metabolic activities, this nervous system control all the activities of our body, including voluntary and involuntary activities. ഇതിൽ കോമൺ ആയിട്ട് ചോദിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആണ്, വിത്ത് ലേബൽ ഡയഗ്രാം ഡിസ്ക്രൈബ് ദ സ്ട്രക്ചർ ഓഫ് ന്യൂറോൺ, വാട്ട് ആർ ദ മേജർ ടൈപ്സ് ഓഫ് ന്യൂറോൺ. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഇതിൻ്റെ ന്യൂറോൺ എന്നുള്ള പാർട്ട് ഇറ്റ്സ് എ സെൽഫ് സ്റ്റഡി, പക്ഷെ നമ്മൾ ജസ്റ്റ് ഒന്ന് എടുത്തു പോകും, സെൽഫായിട്ട് പഠിക്കേണ്ടതാണ്, നിങ്ങൾ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. സോ ന്യൂറോൺ ഈസ് ദ സ്ട്രക്ചറൽ ആൻഡ് ഫങ്ഷണൽ യൂണിറ്റ് ഓഫ് നെർവസ് സിസ്റ്റം. Nervous system include two type of cell. The first one is neurons, and we can see some associated cells along with this neuron. It is called the glial cells. Glial cells are otherwise known as neuroglia. Okay, so neurons and neuroglia are the two major cells present in nervous system. So neurons are the structural and functional unit of nervous system. So totally we can see 100 billion neurons in our body, but the number of glial cells are very high. Neuroglial cells are very high. Almost 10 to 50 times more number of glial cells are present. 10 to 50 times more number of glial cells are present. Neuroninekal 10 to 50 times more number of glial cells are present. ഇനി അടുത്തത് ന്യൂറോണിൻ്റെ ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷൻ ആണ്. സ്ട്രക്ചറൽ idea ആണ്. ന്യൂറോണിൻ്റെ സ്ട്രക്ചറൽ parts ആണ്. So the number one part, the total neuron structure can be divided into three. The first one is called cell body. Cell body is also known as somatic region, and the second part is called axon, and the third part is called dendrite. Okay, basic idea ആണ്, വളരെ simple ആണ്. So first part, cell body. Cell body is also known as soma. It contains all the typical organelles of any cells. Okay, so it represents a normal cell which include all the cell organelles, cytoplasm, etc. So one of the major organelle present in the cell body is nucleus. Nucleus is a large and spherical nucleus present in the cell cytoplasm. It contains a prominent nucleolus region. The cell organelles, different type of cell organelles are also present in the cell body, like endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, mitochondria, lysosome, and Nissl bodies, etc. We are familiar with all these terms, all these name organelles, but Nissl bodies or Nissl granules, അത് നമുക്ക് അത്ര പരിചയമില്ല. Nissl bodies or Nissl granules. What do you mean by Nissl bodies or Nissl granules? It is a clusters of ribosomes on rough endoplasmic reticulum in neurons. So clusters of ribosomes are arranged on rough endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic reticulum means endoplasmic reticulum associated with ribosome. Okay, so clusters of ribosomes on rough endoplasmic reticulum in neurons are called Nissl bodies or Nissl granules. And പേര് വരാൻ കാരണം after Franz Nissl, a German neuropathologist who invented the Nissl staining method. So Nissl bodies or Nissl granules എന്താണ് clusters of ribosome on rough endoplasmic reticulum. So this is the first part of neuron, cell body. The second part is dendrites. It's very familiar. Dendrites are processes extending from the soma or cell body of the neuron. Dendrites are processes extending from the first part, soma or cell body of the neuron. The major role of these dendrites are receiving information from other neurons. So they receive information from other neurons and from sensory receptors. Neurons nu മാത്രമല്ല, they also receive information from sensory receptors. So dendrites as a sensory structure, they receive information from receptors of touch and pressure in skin. Okay, so neurons nu മാത്രമല്ല, receptors of touch, and pressure, ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള different receptors നും information receive ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. So at first they receive information from a neuron or any other type of receptors, and then the next step is they convert this information into membrane potential. Okay, so any information that dendrites receive is converted into changes in membrane potential. Okay, that means they create a positive membrane potential. This changed membrane potential are transmitted towards the cell body of the neuron. So informations are received by the dendrites, and they make a changes in membrane potential, and this changed membrane potentials are transmitted towards the cell body of the neuron. So this is the last part, third part of neuron, axon. What do you mean by axon? Axon is the longest projection, long projection originating from the cell body. Long projection originating from the cell body is called axon. Axon also called nerve fiber. Axon also called nerve fiber. What is the role of axon? It conducts electrical impulses away from the cell body. It conducts electrical impulses away from the cell body. So, first information, impulses are received by the dendrites and enter into cell body, and finally it moves away from the cell body by this axon. A term how to study is axon hillock. Axon hillock. What do I mean by axon hillock? It is actually a junction between the cell body and the axon. The junction between the cell body and axon is called axon hillock. We can see in the picture axon hillock. This is the junction between the cell body and axon. What is the importance of this axon hillock? Axon hillock is in fact the site of origin of action potential. Action potentials are originated from this axon hillock. Okay, so axon arises from the axon hillock. നമുക്ക് 3 പോയിന്റ് പറയാം. Axon hillock എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ it is the junction between the cell body and the axon. Junction between the cell body and axon. The second point is this is a site of origin of action potential, and the third point is axon arises from this axon hillock. Next, what are the major functions of axon? The main function of axon is transmission of action potential. It helps to transmit action potential down its length to the axon terminal or telodendria. Axon terminal are otherwise called telodendria. Okay, so it transmits action potential down its length to the axon terminal or telodendria. So, in the case of telodendria, in each telodendron എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ plural, telodendron എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ singular. So, each telodendron ends in a knob-like expansion called terminal button. Each telodendron ends in a knob-like expansion called terminal button. This terminal button has some other name like synaptic knob or end bulb. Synaptic knob or end bulb. So, axon terminal is the last part, third part, long extension from the cell body. Next, നമുക്ക് പഠിക്കാനുള്ളത് structures connect to axon terminal. Which are the regions which receive information from the axon terminal? The first one is dendrite. ഒന്നുമില്ല, dendrites. Axon dendrite connection ആണ് normally ഉള്ളത്. Okay. In some other cases, we can also see cell bodies. Axon terminal will be connected to cell bodies. And also axons of other neurons. Besides all these structure, non-neural tissue are also seen, like muscle or glandular tissue. Non-neural tissue like muscle or glandular tissue. So, these are the structures connect to axon terminal. Dendrites connect ചെയ്ത് കാണാം, cell bodies connect ചെയ്ത് കാണാം, axons of other neurons connect ചെയ്ത് കാണാം, and also non-neural tissue, muscle or glandular tissue. Muscle നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചതാണ്, neuromuscular junction. If a muscle connected to neuron, there will be a junction formation. That junction is called neuromuscular junction. Next, synapse. What do you mean by synapse? Synapse is actually a gap between the structures. There is no direct physical contact between the axon terminal and these structures. Since there is a gap is present, there is a gap between them called synapse. So between axon and all these structures like dendrite, cell body, axon of the other neuron, there will not be a physical contact. There is a gap. That gap is called synapse. അടുത്ത് നമുക്ക് പഠിക്കാനുള്ളത് വളരെ ഫെമിലിയർ ആണ്. മൈലിനേറ്റഡ് ആൻഡ് നോൺ മൈലിനേറ്റഡ് നെർവ് ഫൈബർ. ഡിസ്റ്റിംഗ്വിഷ് ബിറ്റ്വീൻ മൈലിനേറ്റഡ് ആൻഡ് നോൺ മൈലിനേറ്റഡ് നെർവ് ഫൈബർ. ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. നമ്പർ 1, മൈലിനേറ്റഡ് നെർവ് ഫൈബർ. What do you mean by myelinated nerve fiber? Myelin sheath is formed by Schwann cells, an important cell present in the axon region or myelinated region, or not also it's present in non-myelinated region. So myelin sheath is formed by Schwann cell which wraps themselves around the axon about 100 times. What is the role of Schwann cells? So myelin sheath, നമ്മൾ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത് myelinated and non-myelinated nerve fiber. The presence of myelin sheath, that myelin sheath is formed actually by the Schwann cells. Schwann cells ആണ് myelin sheath ഫോം ചെയ്യുന്നത്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് myelin sheath ഫോം ചെയ്യുന്നത് Schwann cell വഴിയായിട്ട്? This particular cell എന്ത് ചെയ്യും? Wrap themselves around the axon. These cells wrap themselves around the axon about 100 times. Okay, ഒരു കവർ കൊണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ ചുറ്റുന്ന പോലെ, ഒരു ഇൻസുലേഷനെ പോലെ ചുറ്റി ഒടിക്കുന്ന പോലെ ഈ ഷാൻ സെല്ല് ആക്സോണിന് ചുറ്റും ഇങ്ങനെ റാപ്പ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. That is the reason for the formation of myelin sheath. That myelin sheath, that wrapping also encloses fat. Schwann cells form myelin in the peripheral nervous system only. Schwann cells form myelin sheath, myelin in the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system ഉണ്ട്, central nervous system ഉണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ സെൻട്രൽ നെർവസ് സിസ്റ്റത്തിൽ വേറെ ആളാണ് നമ്മൾ നോക്കും. പക്ഷേ ഷാൻ സെല്ലാണ് പെരിഫറൽ നെർവസ് സിസ്റ്റത്തിൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, അങ്ങനെ റാപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് അതിൻ്റെ outermost coil of Schwann cells is called neurolemma. Outermost coil of Schwann cell is called neurolemma. Okay, each Schwann cell wrap around only one axon. Each Schwann cell wrap around only one axon. ഇതെടുത്ത് പറയാൻ കാരണം ഒലിഗോഡെൻഡ്രോസൈറ്റ്സ് ആണ് മറ്റതിൽ സെൻട്രൽ നെർവസ് സിസ്റ്റത്തിൽ വരുന്നത്. അവിടെ more than one axon കണ്ടീഷനാണ്. So most mammalian nerve fibers are wrapped by this Schwann cell. Okay, so myelin sheath ഫോം ചെയ്യുന്ന ആൾ ഷാൻ സെല്ലാണ്. ഷാൻ സെല്ല് റാപ്പ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് 100 times wrapping results formation of this myelin sheath. Okay, അടുത്ത unmyelinated. Unmyelinated means those cells which have no myelin sheaths around the axon. Some mammalian neurons and most invertebrate neurons are example for unmyelinated neurons. Some mammalian neurons and most invertebrate neurons. So normally in invertebrate neurons this myelination is absent. In this condition Schwann cell is already present, but this Schwann cell simply surrounding this neuron. These are simply surrounded by Schwann cells. There is no wrapping. Without the wrapping of Schwann cells membrane around the axon. Okay, so multiple time wrapping is absent. Okay, Schwann cell അവിടെ പ്രസൻ്റ് ആണ്, പക്ഷേ 100 ടൈം റാപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് അങ്ങനെയില്ല. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് സിംപ്ലി സറൗണ്ട് ദി axon. Okay, these are simply surrounded by Schwann cells. Axons are simply surrounded by Schwann cells without the wrapping of Schwann cell membrane around the axon. Next a word is nodes of Ranvier. Nodes of Ranvier. What do you mean by nodes of Ranvier? Nodes of Ranvier is only present in myelinated nerve fiber. In the case of non-myelinated nerve fiber, we cannot see nodes of Ranvier. It is a gap in the myelin sheath of nerve fiber between adjacent Schwann cells. Nodes of Ranvier means it is a gap in the myelin sheath of nerve between adjacent Schwann cells. നമുക്ക് പിക്ചറിൽ കാണാം, അവിടെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് അടയാളപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട് nodes of Ranvier. നോക്കുക. At this point, the axon is reduced in diameter. So, ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ പിക്ചറിൽ നോക്കിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് 3 Schwann cell wrapping കാണാം, 2 nodes of Ranvierum കാണാം. Okay. So these are areas where action potential can be generated. These are areas where action potential can be generated. At this point, the axon is reduced in diameter. Clear on nodes of Ranvier. Next, functions of myelin sheath. What are the major functions of myelin sheath? Number 1, to increase the velocity of action potential. To increase the velocity of action potential. ചെറിയ ക്ലാസ്സിൽ പഠിച്ചതാണ്. Myelin sheath helps to increase the velocity of action potential, and it acts as an insulator. That is the second function. It acts as an insulator. It has high insulating property. It has high insulating property. And the third point is it protects an axon from external pressure and mechanical damage. It protects an axon from external pressure and mechanical damage. So if there is a myelin sheath present, that gives extra protection. That helps to increase the velocity of action potential. It acts as a insulator. It also has insulating property. ഇത്രയും നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞ myelin sheath അവിടെ Schwann cell in the wrapping ആണ്. നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞു Schwann cell is only present. Schwann cell, this type of myelin sheath formed by the Schwann cell only can be seen in peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system. But in the central nervous system, this function is done by another type of cell called oligodendrocyte cells. These all are oligodendrocyte എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത് അത് ന്യൂറോഗ്ലിയൽ സെല്ലാണ്. Neuroglial cell associated with neurons. Oligodendrocyte cell. In the central nervous system, myelin is formed by oligodendrocyte cells. These are another type of glial cells. A single oligodendrocyte can wrap around 50 axons. In the case of Schwann cell, a single Schwann cell can wrap only a single axon, but here at a time an oligodendrocyte can wrap around 50 axon. Oligodendrocyte can wrap around 50 axon. നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരൊറ്റ ആക്സോൺ മാത്രമാണ്, ഇവിടെ 50 ആക്സോണിനെ റാപ്പ് ചെയ്യാം. നെക്സ്റ്റ് ടോപ്പിക് ഈസ് ടൈപ്സ് ഓഫ് ന്യൂറോൺ.